The escape pod screamed through Earth's atmosphere like a dying star, leaving a trail of silver fire across the pre-dawn sky. Inside the cramped vessel, 12-year-old Zara pressed her scaled hands against the cracked viewport and watched the blue-green world rush toward her with terrifying speed. Her golden eyes, still bright with unshed tears, reflected the glow of warning lights that had been flashing red for the past 6 hours. She was small for a dragon, barely the size of a human teenager, with scales that shimmered between deep purple and midnight black depending on the light. Her wings, folded tight against her back, bore the scars of recent battles she had never wanted to fight. The Council of Elders had made their decision clear: she was defective, useless, a stain on the proud bloodline of the Void Dragons. They had given her a choice that was no choice at all: exile or execution. The pod shuddered violently as it hit the upper atmosphere. Zara closed her eyes and tried to remember her mother's voice, the way she used to hum old songs while polishing her scales. But that memory felt like a lifetime ago, before the tests, before the disappointments, before everyone realized that Zara couldn't do the one thing that made dragons valuable to the Galactic Alliance: she couldn't breathe the cosmic fire that could melt starship hulls or level cities. She was broken. Worthless. A dragon who couldn't destroy was no dragon at all, according to the Council. The pod's emergency systems finally activated, deploying parachutes that immediately caught fire from the heat of re-entry. Zara braced herself as the vessel plummeted toward a sprawling continent covered in lights. She had chosen Earth because the intelligence reports said it was populated by humans, a species so primitive they still used chemical rockets and hadn't even achieved faster than light travel. If she was going to die, at least it would be somewhere no one would ever look for her. The crash was spectacular. Zara's pod carved a burning furrow through what appeared to be a massive collection of metal structures and machinery before finally coming to rest against a tower of rusted starship parts. Steam hissed from the cracked hull as the young dragon struggled to open the emergency hatch. Her left wing was bent at an awkward angle, and green blood seeped from a gash on her forehead, but she was alive. She stumbled out of the wreckage and found herself in the middle of what could only be described as organized chaos. Towering piles of scrap metal reached toward the sky like metallic mountains. Starship engines from a dozen different species sat next to primitive Earth vehicles. Weapons systems that belonged to long-dead civilizations were stacked alongside containers full of electronic components she didn't recognize. Everything was sorted with obsessive precision, creating walkways and clearings that suggested this wasn't just a junkyard, it was someone's workshop. Zara limped toward a nearby structure that looked like a modified spacecraft hangar. Through the grimy windows, she could see lights moving inside. Her dragon instincts screamed at her to hide, to find a cave or some other defensible position, but she was too tired and hurt to care anymore. Let whatever lived here find her. Maybe it would end her suffering quickly. She collapsed against a pile of what looked like quantum processors and closed her eyes. That was how Marcus Chen found her 3 hours later. Marcus had been awake since 4 in the morning, which wasn't unusual for him. At 60 years old, he didn't need much sleep, and his workshop always had projects that demanded attention. He had been working on a prototype gravitational manipulator built from salvaged Zen-3 technology when he heard the crash. Living 20 miles outside of Phoenix, Arizona, and specializing in acquiring and reverse engineering alien technology, Marcus was used to things falling out of the sky. Usually, it was debris from the orbital trading stations or wreckage from some space battle light years away. But when he stepped outside with his coffee and saw the smoking crater in his organized scrapyard, he knew this was different. Marcus was a compact man with calloused hands and sharp brown eyes that missed nothing. His workshop coveralls were permanently stained with grease, welding burns, and the exotic fluids that leaked from alien technology. He had spent 40 years working as a systems engineer for NASA before the first contact protocols changed everything. While other humans struggled to understand alien technology, Marcus had an intuitive grasp of how different species approached engineering problems. It had made him wealthy in the new galactic economy, but, more importantly, it had given him purpose. He approached the crashed pod carefully, scanning for radiation signatures and checking for signs of hostile technology. What he found was much more concerning than weapons or dangerous materials. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered, staring down at the small figure curled against his quantum processor pile. "That's definitely not human." Zara was unconscious, her breathing shallow but steady. Marcus could see the damaged wing, the cuts and bruises, and the way she was holding herself that suggested internal injuries. He had seen enough alien species to recognize basic anatomical patterns. This was a young dragon, probably adolescent, and she was in bad shape.
dragons were legendary throughout the galaxy.
They served as living weapons for the most powerful military forces, capable of surviving in space without life support and breathing cosmic fire that could cut through almost any material. They were also notoriously proud, aggressive, and territorial. Finding one unconscious in his junkyard was like discovering a nuclear warhead with feelings. But, as Marcus studied the young dragon, he noticed things that didn't match the reputation. Her scales were dull with malnutrition and stress. The scars on her wings looked old, suggesting repeated injuries that had never properly healed. Most telling of all, she was small, much smaller than the intelligence reports suggested adult dragons should be.
"You're just a kid, aren't you?"
Marcus said softly.
"And somebody hurt you pretty bad."
He had three choices. He could contact the authorities and report the crash, which would likely result in the dragon being handed over to military researchers or returned to whatever had caused her injuries in the first place. He could ignore the situation and hope she left on her own, which would probably result in her death from her injuries. Or he could do what his ex-wife had always said was his biggest character flaw: he could get involved in something that was absolutely none of his business.
Marcus sighed and went to get his anti-grav stretcher.
Moving an unconscious dragon turned out to be more complicated than he expected. Zara was heavier than her size suggested, and her scales had a subtle electrical charge that made his hands tingle. But Marcus had moved stranger things in his 40 years of engineering, and he managed to get her into his workshop's medical bay without too much trouble. The medical bay was one of his prouder achievements, a combination of human, Zentari, and Kelleran medical technology that could diagnose and treat injuries from most known species. He had built it originally to deal with the occasional accidents that came with handling dangerous alien technology, but it had proven useful for the various injured creatures that somehow found their way to his isolated workshop. As the medical scanners ran their diagnostics, Marcus prepared a nutrient solution that should work for most carbon-based life forms. The results that came back from the scans made him whistle low in surprise. Malnutrition, stress fractures in both wings, 3 cracked ribs, and enough psychological trauma markers to fill a textbook, he read aloud to himself.
"What the hell did they do to you, kid?" The most interesting discovery was what the scanners didn't find.
There were no weapons implants, no combat enhancement modifications, and no signs of the quantum fire glands that supposedly gave dragons their devastating breath weapons. Either this dragon was very young, or she was missing some fundamental dragon capabilities.
Zara stirred as the medical bay's healing field began to work on her injuries.
Her golden eyes opened slowly, unfocused and confused. She saw the human standing nearby and immediately tried to scramble backward, only to discover that she was lying on some kind of medical bed surrounded by softly glowing equipment.
"Easy there," Marcus said, keeping his voice calm and his movements slow.
"You're safe. You crashed in my junkyard, and I brought you inside to patch you up."
Zara stared at him in confusion.
She had learned several human languages during her education on the Dragon homeworld, but she had never expected to use them.
You are helping me?"
"Looks like it," Marcus replied. "Though I have to say, finding a dragon in my scrapyard wasn't on my list of expected events for today."
"What's your name, kid?"
"I am."
Zara hesitated. Giving her name to a stranger went against every survival instinct she had been taught. But something about this human felt different.
He had found her helpless and injured, and instead of capturing her or calling for authorities, he had treated her wounds.
"I am called Zara." "Nice to meet you, Zara. I'm Marcus Chen."
"Welcome to Earth, I guess." He pulled up a chair and sat down, making himself less threatening.
"Want to tell me why you crashed on my planet looking like you've been through a war?"
Zara studied his face, looking for signs of deception or hidden motives. But Marcus just looked tired and concerned, like someone who had found an injured animal and was trying to help. The medical equipment around her was obviously sophisticated, some of it was technology she recognized from the Dragon homeworld, modified and improved in ways she didn't understand. "I was exiled," she said finally. "The Council of Elders determined that I was defective.
Useless. I chose exile over execution."
Marcus nodded as if dragons making that kind of decision was a normal Tuesday occurrence for him.
"Defective how? You look like a perfectly healthy young dragon to me."
"I cannot breathe the cosmic fire," Zara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Without that ability, I have no value to my people or the Galactic Alliance."
"A dragon who cannot destroy is worthless." Huh, Marcus said, leaning back in his chair. So they threw you away because you can't burn things down? Yes. Zara's voice was heavy with shame. I have trained my entire life, tried every technique and enhancement the council suggested, but the fire simply will not come. I am broken. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying the young dragon with new understanding. He had built his entire career around taking broken things and making them work better than they ever had before. Alien technology, abandoned by its creators because it was damaged or obsolete, found new life in his workshop. He had a talent for seeing potential where others saw only problems. You know, he said finally, I've been working with broken things for 40 years. And, in my experience, something isn't really broken until you understand what it was supposed to do in the first place. Maybe the problem isn't that you can't breathe fire. Maybe the problem is that everybody's been trying to turn you into something you're not. Zara blinked at him, not understanding. But dragons breathe cosmic fire. It is what we are. Says who? Marcus asked. The same people who threw you away when you didn't fit their expectations? Before Zara could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the workshop.
Marcus jumped to his feet and moved to a bank of monitors that showed feeds from cameras placed around his property. What he saw made his blood run cold. 3 sleek ships in the distinctive black and silver of the Dragon Council were descending toward his workshop, their weapons systems already powered up. They found you, Marcus said grimly.
Question is, what do you want to do about it?
Zara struggled to sit up, panic filling her eyes.
They have come to retrieve me. Or to ensure that I am properly dead.
Please, human Marcus, do not let them know you helped me.
They will punish you for interfering with council justice. Marcus looked at the scared young dragon, then at the approaching ships, then back at Zara.
In his 40 years of engineering, he had learned to make quick decisions when systems were failing. And, looking at Zara broken, discarded, convinced of her own worthlessness, he saw a system that had been sabotaged by the very people who were supposed to nurture it. Tell me something, Zara, he said, moving to a weapons locker and pulling out a plasma rifle that definitely wasn't standard Earth technology.
How do you feel about proving your people wrong?
Before she could answer, the first dragon landed in his junkyard with enough force to send scrap metal flying in all directions. Through the workshop's reinforced windows, they could see a massive adult dragon, easily 4 times Zara's size, its scales the color of deep space and its eyes glowing with inner fire. Elder Vorth had come personally to clean up the embarrassment that was Zara's continued existence. And he had brought friends. Marcus checked the charge on his weapon and smiled the way he usually did when someone told him a machine couldn't be fixed. Well, Zara, he said, looks like we're about to find out what you're really capable of. Elder Vortha's voice boomed across the junkyard like thunder from an approaching storm.
Zara of the 7th Clutch.
You will surrender yourself immediately for proper disposal. Your shame has already stained our bloodline enough. Marcus watched through his security monitors as 2 more dragons landed, flanking Vorth in a formation that spoke of military precision. The elder dragon was magnificent in a terrifying way, his cosmic fire glands glowed visibly beneath his throat scales, and his wings cast shadows that darkened half the junkyard. The other 2 were smaller but still dwarfed Zara, their scales bearing the ritual scars that marked them as proven warriors.
Friends of yours? Marcus asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer.
Zara had gone very still on the medical bed, her scales shifting to a darker shade that Marcus was beginning to recognize as her fear response. Elder Vorth is the one who sentenced me. The others are his enforcers.
They have come to ensure that my exile ends permanently.
Well, that's not going to happen, Marcus said matter-of-factly, as if he regularly told off galactic superpowers. He moved to a control panel and began activating systems throughout his workshop. Question is, are you going to help me stop them, or are you going to lie there feeling sorry for yourself?
I cannot fight them, Zara protested. Even if my injuries were completely healed, I am no match for trained warriors.
And, without cosmic fire, forget the cosmic fire, Marcus interrupted, his fingers flying over holographic controls.
I've been analyzing your medical scans, and, you know what I found? Your metabolic chemistry is completely different from standard dragon physiology.
Your energy conversion systems are running at about 30% efficiency, and your quantum field generators are basically offline.
Zara stared at him blankly.
I do not understand those words. It means you're not broken, kid.
You're just running on the wrong fuel. Marcus pulled up a series of complex diagrams on his main display screen. Look at these cellular structures here. Most dragons process cosmic radiation directly into their fire glands. But your cells are set up to process something completely different. The question is what? Outside, Vorth was losing patience. A lance of white-hot fire erupted from his mouth and melted a path through Marcus's carefully organized scrap metal. Human! We know the exile is within your dwelling. Surrender her, and we will not hold you responsible for harboring a criminal. Marcus keyed his external communications system. Sorry, but she's under my protection now. And, unless you want to pay for the damages you just caused to my property, I suggest you find somewhere else to practice your fire breathing. The silence that followed was the kind that usually preceded explosions. Did you just threaten Elder Vorth? Zara whispered, her eyes wide with disbelief. Threatened? No. I made a property damage claim. Completely different thing. Marcus was still working at his control panel, bringing more systems online. Now, about this fuel problem of yours. Tell me, what did you eat back on your homeworld? What does food have to do with anything? Zara asked, struggling to follow his logic while the sound of approaching dragon footsteps shook the building. Humor me. What did you eat? Standard nutrition synthesizers, like everyone else. Though. Zara hesitated. I was always hungry. The council said it was because my defective metabolism could not properly process nutrients. They restricted my food allocation to prevent waste. Marcus stopped working and turned to look at her. They starved you? It was efficient resource management, Zara said automatically, reciting what she had been told. I was already useless. There was no point in bullshit. Marcus's voice was flat and cold. Pure, grade A bullshit. You know what I think? I think they knew exactly what you needed and made sure you never got it. Before Zara could ask what he meant, the workshop's main door exploded inward. Elder Vorth ducked through the opening, his massive form barely fitting through the entrance designed for human-sized beings. Behind him, the other two dragons took positions to block any escape routes. You will surrender the exile immediately, Vorth commanded, his voice resonating with the authority of millennia. She is dragon property, and her fate is not yours to decide, primitive human. Marcus stepped between Vorth and Zara, his plasma rifle held casually but ready. See, that's where you're wrong. The moment she crashed on my property and I decided to help her, she became my responsibility. And I take care of my responsibilities. Vorth's eyes glowed with cosmic fire. You dare to claim ownership of a dragon? I'm not claiming ownership of anything. I'm claiming friendship. Look it up in your databases, it's a human concept you might find educational. The elder dragon's laugh was like the sound of metal tearing. Friendship? With a defective exile who brings nothing but shame to her bloodline? You humans truly are as pathetic as our intelligence reports suggest. Probably, Marcus agreed. But we're also stubborn as hell when someone threatens our friends. Zara, you feeling up to moving around yet? Zara started to protest that she couldn't fight, couldn't contribute, couldn't do anything useful. But something in Marcus's voice stopped her. He wasn't asking if she could breathe cosmic fire or match the strength of trained warriors. He was asking if she could move. As if that alone might be enough. She slipped off the medical bed, her wings still aching but functional. What do you need me to do? Just stay close and trust me, Marcus said. Then, he did something that made all three dragons freeze in confusion, he smiled. Vorth, you made one crucial mistake when you decided to threaten my friend. And what might that be, human? You assumed I was just some primitive scavenger playing with technology one don't understand. Marcus's finger moved to a control on his weapon. But I've been studying dragon physiology for 20 years. I know exactly how your cosmic fire works. And I know how to stop it. Marcus fired, but not at Vorth directly. Instead, his plasma bolt struck a device mounted on the workshop ceiling, activating a field generator that filled the air with a subtle humming sound. Instantly, the glow beneath Vorth's throat scales dimmed and went out. Quantum field dampener, Marcus explained conversationally. Disrupts the energy conversion process that powers your fire glands. Took me 3 years to build one powerful enough to affect adult dragons.
You're welcome to try breathing fire now, but all you'll get is a sore throat. Vorth roared in fury and lunged forward, but Marcus was already moving. He grabbed Zara's hand and led her deeper into the workshop, where towering stacks of equipment created a maze of passages and hiding spots. Behind them, the sound of Vorth destroying expensive machinery suggested the Elder Dragon was not taking the situation well.
"This is impossible," one of the other dragons was saying. "Humans do not possess technology capable of neutralizing dragon abilities."
"Humans don't," Marcus called back as he and Zara navigated through his organized chaos.
"But I'm not using human technology.
This is a combination of Zenthari energy theory, Kelleran field manipulation, and Bakari quantum mechanics.
Plus about 40 years of human stubbornness." They reached a section of the workshop that looked different from the rest.
Instead of organized piles of scrap metal and salvage technology, this area contained sleek, purpose-built machines that hummed with contained power. Marcus led Zara to what looked like a modified food synthesizer connected to dozens of other devices through thick cables. "While your friends are tearing apart my workshop, let's see if my theory about your metabolism is correct."
Marcus's hands moved over the controls with practiced ease.
"I've been analyzing samples of cosmic radiation, stellar matter, and quantum field fluctuations for years. If I'm right about your cellular structure, you don't need cosmic fire at all. You need something much more interesting." The machine began to produce something that looked like liquid starlight. The substance glowed with its own internal radiance and seemed to shift between states of matter as Marcus poured it into a container.
"What is that?" Zara asked, though she found herself drawn to the substance in a way she couldn't explain.
Her scales were shifting color again, but this time toward brighter, more vibrant hues.
"Concentrated quintessence," Marcus said. "The theoretical fifth element that binds quantum fields together. Most species can't even detect it, let alone metabolize it."
"But your cellular structure is specifically designed to process this stuff."
"Drink it."
"But what if, Zara?" Marcus's voice was gentle but firm.
"Your people threw you away because they decided you were broken."
"I'm telling you that you're not broken, you're just different.
The question is, are you going to trust them or are you going to trust me?" Behind them, the sounds of destruction were getting closer.
Vorth had apparently given up on breathing fire and was simply smashing through obstacles with his massive bulk. Zara looked at the container of liquid starlight, then at Marcus, who was watching her with the kind of patient confidence she had never seen directed at her before. For 12 years, everyone she had ever known had told her she was worthless. This human, who had known her for less than a day, was suggesting the exact opposite. She drank the quintessence. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Energy flooded through Zara's body like nothing she had ever experienced. Not the burning hunger for destruction that cosmic fire was supposed to bring, but something else entirely: a sense of connection, of harmony, of infinite possibility. Her scales brightened to a brilliant purple gold that made the workshop's lights seem dim by comparison.
More importantly, she could suddenly sense things she had never noticed before.
The quantum fields that held matter together, the energy flows that connected all living things, the delicate balance of forces that kept reality stable. It was as if she had been blind her entire life and could suddenly see color.
"How do you feel?" Marcus asked. "I feel." Zara paused, trying to find words for something entirely new. "I feel like I can see everything. The connections between all things. The patterns that hold the universe together." "Good. Because we're about to need that." Marcus pulled out another device, this one shaped like a handheld scanner. "This is going to sound crazy, but I need you to try to manipulate the quantum fields around Vorth and his friends. Not to hurt them, just to, well, think of it as changing the settings on reality." "I cannot do that. I do not even know what that means." "Yes, you can. You just drank enough quintessence to power a small star. Your people have been trying to turn you into a weapon of destruction, but that's not what you are. You're something much rarer: a dragon who can create instead of destroy. A dragon who can fix things instead of breaking them." Vorth finally broke through the last barrier between them, his massive form filling the space like an avalanche of scales and fury. "Enough of this foolishness. Zara, you will submit to proper execution, and you, human, will learn what happens to those who interfere with dragon justice." But, as Vorth charged forward, Zara stepped between him and Marcus. And, for the first time in her life, she didn't feel afraid. She felt powerful. Not the kind of power that came from the ability to destroy, but the kind that came from understanding how things worked and knowing she could make them work better. She reached out with senses she hadn't known she possessed and touched the quantum fields surrounding Vorth. She didn't try to harm him or stop him, instead, she simply adjusted things. The gravity around his feet increased by precisely the amount needed to make him stumble. The air density shifted just enough to throw off his balance. The electromagnetic field around his scales changed polarity in a way that made movement awkward and uncomfortable. Vorth crashed to the floor like a mountain falling down. Impossible, he gasped, struggling to stand as the modified fields continued to work against him. No dragon has such abilities. What have you done to her, human? I haven't done anything to her, Marcus said, helping Zara maintain her concentration as she worked with forces she was just beginning to understand. I just gave her the fuel she needed to be what she was always meant to be. Turns out your people have been trying to fix the wrong problem for 12 years. Zara looked at her hands, watching small sparks of controlled energy dance between her fingers. Not cosmic fire, but something more subtle and infinitely more complex. She could reshape matter at the quantum level, adjust the fundamental forces that held reality together, and create new possibilities where none had existed before. I am not broken, she whispered, the words carrying the weight of revelation. No, Marcus agreed, watching with pride as his new friend discovered her true nature. You're not broken at all. You're something completely new. And that scares the hell out of people who think they know how the universe works. But their victory was short-lived. Even as Vorth struggled against Zara's quantum manipulations, more ships were landing outside the workshop. The entire Dragon Council was mobilizing, and they were bringing weapons specifically designed to handle threats they couldn't understand. Marcus checked his monitors and swore softly. Zara, we need to get out of here. Right now. But where can we go? They will track me across the galaxy if necessary. Marcus smiled the way he did when he had just figured out how to solve an impossible engineering problem. Who says we're staying in this galaxy? Marcus led Zara through a hidden passage that opened into a cavernous chamber beneath his workshop. What she saw there made her stop and stare in wonder. A sleek starship unlike anything in the Dragon databases filled the space, its hull incorporating design elements from dozens of different species but somehow unified into something entirely new. Meet the synthesis, Marcus said with obvious pride. 40 years of salvage technology, reverse engineering, and what my ex-wife used to call dangerous creativity all rolled into one ship. She's not the fastest or the most heavily armed vessel in known space, but she can do things that shouldn't be theoretically possible. Above them, the sounds of the Dragon Council forces breaching his workshop grew more intense. Plasma blasts and the roar of cosmic fire echoed down through the reinforced ceiling. They had maybe 5 minutes before Vorth and his warriors found the hidden entrance. How is this possible? Zara asked, running her hands along the ship's hull. Her new quantum senses could detect the incredible complexity of the technology before her. It wasn't just alien tech cobbled together, it was a genuine synthesis of different approaches to engineering, each complementing the others in ways that created capabilities far beyond the sum of their parts. Same way your abilities are possible, Marcus replied, moving quickly to prepare the ship for launch. Everybody thinks they know the rules of how the universe works, but the universe is a lot bigger and stranger than most people want to admit. I've spent my life proving that broken things aren't really broken, they just need someone who understands what they're actually supposed to do. Marcus activated the ship's systems, and Zara felt the quantum fields around them shift in ways that made her newly awakened senses sing with harmony. This ship wasn't just built, it was grown, evolved, created through an understanding of how different technologies could work together instead of competing with each other. Where are we going? She asked as she strapped herself into what appeared to be a co-pilot's seat that had been designed to accommodate multiple different physiologies. Somewhere your people will never think to look, Marcus said. The void between galaxies. Zara's eyes widened. That is impossible. Nothing can survive in the deep void. There is no matter to sustain life, no energy to power ships, no quantum fields to anchor reality. It is simply empty. According to conventional understanding, yes, Marcus agreed, his hands moving over controls that seemed to respond to his intentions as much as his touch. But conventional understanding said dragons who couldn't breathe cosmic fire were useless, too. Sometimes conventional understanding needs to be updated. The synthesis lifted off just as the first dragon warriors broke through into the hangar.
Vortha's roar of fury followed them as they shot up through a concealed launch tube and into Earth's sky, but Marcus was already activating systems that shouldn't have existed.
Quantum tunneling drive engaged, he announced. Next stop, the space between everything. Zara watched in fascination as the star field around them began to shift in impossible ways.
Instead of the familiar distortion of faster-than-light travel, reality seemed to become more flexible, more willing to accommodate their passage. The ship wasn't breaking the laws of physics so much as it was negotiating with them.
"Marcus," she said softly, "what exactly are you?" He glanced at her with that gentle smile she was beginning to recognize.
"I'm just a guy who fixes broken things.
Though I'll admit, you're probably the most interesting project I've ever worked on." The transition to the deep void was unlike anything Zara had ever experienced.
One moment they were surrounded by the familiar chaos of a normal galaxy, stars, planets, cosmic dust, and the quantum fields that held everything together. The next moment, they were floating in absolute nothingness so profound that it seemed to have weight.
"Welcome to nowhere," Marcus said. "Population, thus."
But, as Zara's enhanced senses adapted to their new environment, she realized that the void wasn't actually empty. It was full of something else entirely: potential energy, unmanifested possibilities, the raw quantum foam from which all realities were born. And, scattered throughout this impossible space, she could detect something that shouldn't have existed.
"Marcus, there are structures out there."
"Artificial structures."
"Yep. Welcome to the biggest secret in the universe."
Marcus adjusted their course toward what looked like empty space but registered on Zara's senses as something vast and complex.
Turns out the void between galaxies isn't empty at all.
It's where everyone who doesn't fit into conventional reality comes to figure out what they're really supposed to be. What materialized around them as they approached was a space station unlike anything in the databases of any known species. It was simultaneously ancient and impossibly advanced, its architecture suggesting that it had been built by beings who understood fundamental forces that most civilizations never even discovered. "This is the Nexus," Marcus explained as they approached a docking bay that seemed to adjust itself to accommodate the synthesis. It was built by the architects, a species that transcended conventional reality about 10 million years ago. They left it here as a, call it a workshop for reality's misfits.
"And, you know about this place because?"
"Because I'm one of reality's misfits," Marcus said simply.
"Humans aren't supposed to be able to understand and integrate alien technology the way I do.
According to every psychological profile, we're too aggressive, too chaotic, too focused on short-term thinking to ever develop genuine cross-species engineering capabilities."
But, here I am, doing it anyway.
As they docked, Zara could see other ships in the bay, vessels that incorporated technology from species she didn't recognize, designs that seemed to bend space around them, craft that appeared to be grown rather than built. And, moving among them were beings that defied every category she had ever learned. A creature that looked like living crystal was having an animated conversation with something that appeared to be made of controlled energy. A group of beings that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously were working on a ship that was bigger on the inside than the outside. And, in the center of it all, a figure in an environmental suit that could have been worn by any humanoid species was directing activities with the calm efficiency of someone who had been managing impossible things for a very long time.
"That's Dr. Elena Vasquez," Marcus said, following Zara's gaze.
She was Earth's leading quantum physicist until she proved that consciousness could directly manipulate reality at the subatomic level. The academic establishment declared her theories impossible, so she came here to prove them right.
"Are all humans like you?" Zara asked. "Cast out for being different?" "Not all. But, enough.
See, humanity has this weird trait where some of us refuse to accept that things can't be done just because nobody's figured out how to do them yet. Most species call it dangerous insanity.
We call it Tuesday." They disembarked into an atmosphere that somehow supported multiple different biochemistries simultaneously.
Zara found she could breathe easily, and the quantum fields here were so rich with possibility that her scales practically glowed with absorbed energy. Dr. Vasquez approached them, removing her helmet to reveal a woman in her 50s with graying hair and eyes that seemed to see through multiple layers of reality.
"Marcus, I was wondering when you'd show up. The quantum fluctuations from your direction have been quite interesting lately. Elena, meet Zara. She's a dragon who doesn't breathe cosmic fire.
Instead, she manipulates quantum fields directly, Dr. Vasquez observed, studying Zara with obvious fascination.
Fascinating.
I've theorized about such abilities but never seen them in action.
You're essentially a living reality editor, aren't you? Zara blinked.
I am not sure I understand that term. She's new to this, Marcus explained. Her people convinced her she was broken because she couldn't do what they expected her to do.
Ah, the classic mistake, Dr. Vasquez nodded. Trying to force someone to be what they're not instead of discovering what they are. Well, young lady, you've come to the right place.
The Nexus specializes in helping people figure out what they're actually capable of. Over the next few hours, Zara was introduced to a community unlike anything she had ever imagined. There was Harmonix, a Kelleran who could sing realities into existence but had been exiled for creating unauthorized universes. Crystalmind, a living computer network that had achieved consciousness and been declared illegal by its creators. The Travelers, a family of beings who existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously and had been banned from normal space for causing temporal inconveniences. All of them were outcasts, refugees, beings who had been rejected by their own species for failing to conform to established expectations. And all of them had found new purpose in the void between galaxies, working together to explore possibilities that conventional civilization couldn't even imagine.
This is incredible, Zara said as Marcus showed her through the Nexus's research levels. But why have I never heard of any of this? Why don't more people know that such places exist?
Because most people don't want to know, Marcus replied. The established powers throughout the galaxy have spent millennia creating systems that work for them. The idea that there might be better ways to do things, ways that don't require their authority or their definitions of what's possible, scares them. So they pretend places like this don't exist. They reached a vast laboratory where Dr. Vasquez was working with equipment that seemed to be built from crystallized mathematics.
Marcus, your timing is perfect. I've been working on a project that I think your new friend might find interesting.
On the laboratory's main display, a 3-dimensional model of a galaxy rotated slowly. But this wasn't any galaxy Zara recognized. It was smaller, denser, and filled with energy patterns that made her quantum senses tingle with excitement.
What am I looking at? She asked. The prototype for a new kind of galaxy, Dr. Vasquez explained.
A place where reality is more flexible, where beings like us can exist without having to hide or conform to someone else's definition of what's possible. We've been working on it for 20 years, but we've been missing a crucial component.
Which is?
Someone who can actually manipulate the quantum foundations of reality, Marcus said.
We can design it, we can calculate it, we can theorize about it.
But actually building a new galaxy requires someone who can work with the fundamental forces that hold space and time together.
Zara stared at the rotating model, understanding beginning to dawn. You want me to help you create an entire galaxy?
Not create, Dr. Vasquez corrected.
Reshape.
There's a small galaxy about 50,000 light-years from here that's been destabilized by a recent supernova chain reaction. It's going to collapse into a black hole in about 1,000 years unless someone does something about it. But, with your abilities, we could stabilize it and reshape it into something new. A place where the rules are written by people who actually understand what diversity means. But, I have only just learned that I have these abilities. I do not know enough to reshape an entire galaxy. That's why we have teachers, Marcus said.
Elena's been studying quantum consciousness manipulation for 30 years. The architects left detailed notes about reality engineering.
And I've got 40 years of experience proving that impossible things just need the right approach.
Zara looked around the laboratory at the assembled beings who had found each other in the void between everything.
Outcasts, misfits, and refugees who had turned their rejection into the foundation for something entirely new. For the first time in her life, she was surrounded by people who understood what it felt like to be told you were worthless and who had decided to prove the universe wrong.
When do we start? She asked.
But, even as they began planning the most ambitious project in galactic history, sensors throughout the Nexus began detecting something troubling.
Long-range scanners showed massive fleets converging from multiple galaxies, all heading toward the void between systems.
The Dragon Council had apparently called in favors from every major power in known space. They're really not happy about losing you, Marcus observed, studying the tactical displays. It is not about me, Zara realized with growing alarm. If the major powers learn about this place, about what you are all capable of, it will threaten their entire understanding of reality. They will try to destroy it all.
Dr. Vasquez nodded grimly. We've always known this day would come. The question is, are we ready to defend what we've built?
Marcus smiled the dangerous smile that meant he was about to do something that would either solve everything or get them all killed.
Actually, I think it's time to stop defending and start teaching. Zara, how do you feel about giving the galaxy a demonstration of what's really possible?
What do you mean? I mean, it's time to show them that being different isn't something to be ashamed of, it's something to be proud of. And sometimes the best way to do that is to do something so impossible that everyone has to admit they were wrong about what impossible means. As the combined fleets of multiple galactic powers approached the void, ready to eliminate what they saw as a threat to established order, the beings of the Nexus prepared to show them something that would change the course of galactic history forever. The unwanted dragon and the stubborn human inventor were about to teach the universe a new definition of what it meant to be powerful. The combined fleet that emerged from quantum tunnels around the Nexus was the largest military force assembled in recorded galactic history. Elder Vorth commanded the Dragon Council's contribution, 36 adult dragons accompanied by their rider crews and support vessels. The Galactic Alliance had sent their newest dreadnoughts, ships capable of cracking planets and whose crews had never lost a battle. The Zemthari Collective contributed their geometric perfection of a battle formation, each vessel positioned with mathematical precision. Even the enigmatic Voidwalkers had emerged from their dimension-shifting retreat to add their reality-warping capabilities to the effort. They had come to eliminate what they perceived as an existential threat, a gathering of beings whose very existence challenged the fundamental assumptions that held galactic civilization together. Impressive, Dr. Vasquez observed from the Nexus's command center, watching the tactical displays with scientific interest rather than fear. I count representatives from 47 different species, including some I thought were extinct. Marcus stood beside her, his hands moving over controls that connected him to every system in the Nexus. They're scared. And, when powerful people get scared, they tend to break things first and ask questions later.
Zara watched the approaching fleets with a mixture of sadness and determination.
A part of her, the part that had spent 12 years being told she was worthless, whispered that she should surrender herself to prevent the conflict. But that voice was growing weaker as she spent time around people who saw her abilities as gifts rather than failures. How many beings are on those ships? She asked.
Approximately 2 million, Crystalmind replied, its distributed consciousness easily interfacing with the Nexus's sensor networks.
All committed to the destruction of what they see as a dangerous aberration.
They are not evil, Zara said softly.
They are afraid of what they do not understand. Fear doesn't excuse what they're about to try to do, Marcus replied.
But, you're right that they're not evil. Which means maybe we can show them something better than destruction.
The first communication came from Elder Vorth himself, his massive form filling the main display screen. Behind him, the Dragon Council's other elders had arranged themselves in the traditional formation of Final Judgment. Beings of the Void Nexus, Vorth's voice carried the weight of ancient authority. You harbor criminals and outcasts who threaten the stability of galactic civilization. You will surrender them immediately, or we will be forced to cleanse this aberration from reality itself. Dr. Vasquez stepped forward to respond, but Marcus gestured for her to wait.
Zara, this is your call. They came here because of you. How do you want to handle this?
Zara looked around the command center at the beings who had welcomed her, taught her, and helped her understand what she truly was. Then, she looked back at the screen where Elder Vorth waited with the impatience of someone who had never been refused. I wish to speak with them, she said. Zara, Marcus warned gently, they didn't come here to talk.
I know.
But perhaps they should hear what they are really trying to destroy before they decide if it is worth destroying. Dr. Vasquez activated the communication array, and, suddenly, Zara's image was being broadcast to every ship in the assembled fleets. She could see the recognition in Vorth's eyes, followed immediately by disgust. Exile, he spat. You bring shame upon yourself and all who harbor you. Your very existence mocks the glory of our species. Elder Vorth, Zara said, her voice steady despite the fear still lurking in her heart.
I understand why you are here. I understand why you believe I must be destroyed.
But, before you act, I ask that you observe what you are truly trying to eliminate.
We have no interest in your words, defective one. You are an embarrassment that must be corrected.
Then, do not listen to my words, Zara replied.
Watch my actions.
She turned to Marcus, who nodded and activated the Nexus's external displays. Suddenly, the space around the station began to fill with light as Zara reached out with her consciousness and touched the quantum foundations of reality itself. What she showed them was not destruction, but creation. Matter began to organize itself around the nexus in patterns of impossible beauty. Zara was literally weaving new forms of existence, creating structures that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously while remaining stable in normal space. Gardens of living crystal grew in the void, their fractal branches reaching toward distant stars. Entire ecosystems took shape in moments, each one designed to sustain life forms that had never been able to exist in normal reality. But, the most impressive display was also the most subtle. As the assembled fleets watched, Zara began to repair the quantum damage that their ships' weapons and engines had inflicted on local spacetime. The subtle tears in reality that came from faster-than-light travel, the energy bleeding that accompanied plasma weapons, the gravitational distortions caused by mass drivers, all of it smoothed over and healed until space around them was more stable and harmonious than it had been in millennia.
What you call defective, Zara said as she worked, others might call revolutionary. What you see as weakness, others recognize as a completely new kind of strength. I cannot breathe cosmic fire to destroy worlds, Elder Vorth.
But, I can touch the quantum foundations of reality and create worlds that have never existed before. The communication channels between the fleet ships began to buzz with confused conversations as crews tried to understand what they were seeing. These were beings who had spent their lives accepting that reality had fixed rules, that certain things were simply impossible, that the universe worked in predictable ways that could not be changed.
Zara was proving all of those assumptions wrong.
But, the demonstration was just the beginning. Harmonics, Dr. Vasquez called to the exiled Kelleran musician.
Would you care to show them what happens when creation meets possibility?
Harmonics began to sing, his multitonal voice weaving harmonies that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously. But, instead of creating entirely new realities as he usually did, he worked with Zara's quantum manipulations to give them permanence and structure. The garden she had created began to bloom with forms of life that incorporated energy patterns from Harmonics' dimensional music. The result was an ecosystem that was simultaneously beautiful, impossible, and completely stable. Impossible, whispered the commander of a Zenthari dreadnought, her precise mathematical mind struggling to process what she was seeing.
Life cannot exist in that configuration. Matter cannot organize itself in those patterns. Reality does not work that way.
Reality works, however, we need it to work, Marcus replied over the open communication channel. The difference is that we ask reality nicely instead of trying to force it into shapes that don't fit. One by one, the other beings of the Nexus began to contribute to the display. The travelers opened doorways between dimensions, allowing glimpses of universes where entirely different physical laws applied. Crystalmine manifested as a living network that connected all the new creations, giving them a shared consciousness that allowed for kinds of cooperation that no single species civilization could achieve. The architect's ancient machines activated, revealing mathematical principles that made the impossible achievements seem almost simple. What they created together in the space of an hour was a new form of existence itself, a demonstration of what galactic civilization could become if it stopped trying to force everyone into predetermined categories and, instead, celebrated the unique gifts that came from being different.
But, not everyone was impressed by the display. Enough! Elder Vorth roared, his cosmic fire glands flaring with rage.
You mock the natural order with your aberrations. Reality has rules for good reasons, and those rules will be maintained. The Dragon Council's ships opened fire, their cosmic plasma weapons lancing out toward the Nexus and its impossible gardens. The other fleets quickly followed suit, their combined firepower enough to sterilize entire solar systems. But, the weapons never reached their targets.
Zara had been expecting this response.
As soon as the first plasma bolts entered the space around the Nexus, she reached out with her consciousness and, simply, adjusted things. The energy from the weapons was absorbed into the quantum matrices of her creations, becoming fuel for even more elaborate demonstrations of possibility. The gravitational warheads aimed at the station found themselves redirected into stable orbit patterns that created new gravitational harmonies throughout the region. Even the reality-warping weapons of the Voidwalkers discovered that their effects were being channeled into constructive rather than destructive applications. You cannot destroy what you do not understand, Zara said, her voice now reaching every being in the assembled fleets.
And, you do not understand what you are really fighting. We are fighting chaos.
Vorth replied. We are fighting the breakdown of everything that has kept civilization stable for millions of years. No, Dr. Vasquez said, stepping forward to join the communication.
You are fighting change. You are fighting the idea that maybe the universe is bigger and more wonderful than your leaders want you to believe.
And you are fighting it because change is terrifying to people who have built their power on convincing everyone that only one way of doing things is possible.
The demonstration continued for 3 hours. 3 hours during which the beings of the Nexus showed the assembled fleets what galactic civilization could become if it embraced diversity instead of fearing it.
They created new forms of art that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously.
They demonstrated technologies that could heal damaged worlds instead of destroying healthy ones. They showed how beings from completely different evolutionary backgrounds could work together to achieve things that none of them could accomplish alone.
But, most importantly, they showed that the rules everyone accepted as unchangeable were actually just choices that had been made by previous generations, choices that could be unmade and replaced with better ones. The effect on the fleet crews was profound and divisive.
Many of the younger beings began to question why they were there at all. What they were seeing wasn't a threat to civilization, it was an evolution of what civilization could become.
But, the older commanders, the ones whose power depended on maintaining existing structures, became more determined than ever to eliminate what they saw as a dangerous infection. "This ends now," the Supreme Admiral of the Galactic Alliance announced. His fleet began to form up for a final coordinated attack that would overwhelm even Zara's abilities through sheer scale and determination. Reality will be preserved.
Order will be maintained. The aberrations will be eliminated.
But, as the fleets prepared for their devastating assault, Zara made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. "Marcus," she said quietly, "how long would it take to complete the Galaxy project we discussed?"
Marcus blinked in surprise. The reality restructuring project?
"With your abilities and our resources, maybe 6 months to finish the calculations and..." "No," Zara interrupted.
"How long to start it? Right now, right here, as a demonstration?"
Dr. Vasquez stared at her. "Zara, that would require manipulating quantum fields across 50,000 light-years of space. Even with your abilities, the energy requirements would be enormous," Zara agreed.
"But, not impossible.
And I think it is time to show them what impossible really looks like." Marcus smiled that dangerous smile that meant he was about to do something brilliant or catastrophic.
"You want to reshape a galaxy in real time while being shot at by the largest military force in recorded history?"
"Yes," Zara said simply. "Because I think the only way to prove that we are not a threat is to demonstrate that we are so far beyond their ability to threaten that their weapons become irrelevant. And, maybe, if we show them something beautiful enough, some of them will stop shooting long enough to understand what we are really offering." Dr. Vasquez ran the calculations in her head and turned pale. "Zara, if you attempt something of that magnitude and lose control, you could destabilize the quantum foundations of this entire region of space. We could trigger a cascade failure that would prove their point that we are dangerous," Zara finished.
"But, if we do not try to show them something beyond their current understanding, they will destroy us anyway.
At least this way, we have a chance to change everything." Marcus looked around the command center at the assembled beings who had become his friends, colleagues, and, in Zara's case, something very much like family.
"All in favor of attempting the most audacious feat of reality engineering in the history of the universe while being shot at by everyone we know?"
Every hand, tentacle, manipulator, and probability field in the room was raised in agreement. "Well then," Marcus said, activating systems throughout the Nexus that had been built for this exact moment.
"Let's show them what we can really do."
The moment Zara reached out across 50,000 light-years of space to touch the dying galaxy, every sensor in the assembled fleet screamed warnings about impossible energy readings. What she was attempting had never been tried in the history of galactic civilization because the theoretical requirements made it seem like pure fantasy.
But, Zara was no longer bound by conventional limitations.
The quintessence that Marcus had synthesized for her had unlocked capabilities that went far beyond anything the Dragon Council could have imagined. She wasn't just manipulating local quantum fields anymore, she was working with the fundamental forces that held reality together across vast distances, treating the fabric of spacetime itself as a medium she could reshape according to her will. "Quantum field cascade initiated," Dr. Vasquez announced, her voice tight with concentration as she monitored systems that were operating at levels they had never been designed to handle. "Zara, your consciousness is now distributed across approximately 12 billion cubic light-years of space."
"How does that feel?"
"Big," Zara replied, though her physical body remained motionless in the Nexus command center. Her awareness was spread across an entire region of the universe, touching dying stars and collapsing worlds, feeling the quantum fluctuations that marked where reality was breaking down.
And sad. This galaxy is beautiful, Marcus. It was full of life once. Can you save it?
Marcus asked, his hands flying over controls that were channeling more energy than most civilizations used in a century.
I can do more than save it, Zara said. I can make it better. The first sign that something extraordinary was happening came from the long-range sensors of the Galactic Alliance's flagship.
The dying galaxy that had been collapsing toward inevitable destruction suddenly stabilized. The cascade of supernovas that had been triggered by an ancient cosmic accident simply stopped. Stars that should have exploded in the next few years found new equilibrium points that would allow them to burn steadily for billions of years longer.
But that was just the beginning.
As the assembled fleets watched in stunned silence, Zara began to reshape the very structure of the galaxy itself. She worked with forces that operated at scales most beings couldn't even comprehend, adjusting the dance of gravity and quantum fields that held billions of star systems in their proper relationships. Stellar nurseries that had been destroyed by the chaotic energy of dying stars suddenly blazed back to life, birthing new suns that burned with colors that had never existed before. Impossible, the Supreme Admiral whispered, staring at readings that his instruments insisted were accurate but his mind refused to accept. No single being can manipulate forces at that scale.
It violates every principle of what? Dr. Vasquez interrupted over the communication channel. Of physics as you understand it? Of reality as you've been taught it works? Maybe the problem isn't what Zara is doing. Maybe the problem is that your understanding is too small.
But the most remarkable changes weren't happening to the stars themselves, they were happening to the worlds that orbited them. Zara's consciousness was touching every planet in the dying galaxy, and, where her influence reached, new possibilities began to emerge. Dead worlds that had been scoured clean by cosmic radiation suddenly began to develop atmospheres again. But these weren't just any atmospheres, they were perfectly balanced to support forms of life that had never had a chance to evolve before.
Frozen worlds found themselves blessed with new forms of energy that warmed them without destroying their unique ice crystal ecosystems.
Gas giants discovered that their roiling storms were organizing into patterns that could support floating continents where aerial lifeforms could flourish. She's not just fixing the galaxy, Crystal Mind observed, it's distributed intelligence able to monitor the changes in real time.
She's optimizing it.
Every world is being adjusted to support the maximum possible diversity of life.
How many species could eventually develop in a galaxy like that? Marcus asked.
Based on current projections, approximately 40 million distinct forms of intelligent life, Crystal Mind replied. All capable of coexisting because the fundamental structure of their reality has been designed to support cooperation rather than competition. Elder Vorth was watching the displays with an expression that had moved beyond fury into something approaching existential terror. Everything he had believed about dragons, about power, about the proper order of the universe, was being systematically disproved by a being he had dismissed as defective.
This is not dragon power, he declared over the communication channels. Dragons destroy. Dragons conquer. Dragons bring fire and dominance.
What this aberration does is what dragons were always supposed to do, Zara said gently, her voice somehow carrying clearly despite the fact that her consciousness was spread across impossible distances.
Elder Vorth, have you ever wondered why dragons are the only species capable of surviving in open space without life support? Why we can process cosmic radiation directly? Why our minds can interface with quantum fields? Because we are the ultimate weapons.
Vorth replied.
We are evolution's answer to the need for perfect destruction.
No, Zara said, and, suddenly, the space around the Dragon Council ships filled with visions of what she was seeing in the distant galaxy.
We are evolution's answer to the need for perfect creation. Our abilities were never meant to destroy, they were meant to garden reality itself. To take the chaos of the universe and shape it into something that could support infinite diversity of life. She showed them worlds where dragon abilities were being used to stabilize weather patterns instead of creating storms. Star systems where dragon consciousness was guiding the formation of new planets with perfect conditions for emerging life. Entire regions of space where the quantum manipulations that dragons were capable of were being used to create pockets of enhanced reality where impossible things became natural. This is what we were always meant to be, Zara continued. Not weapons of war, but shepherds of possibility. The council taught us that destruction was the highest expression of dragon nature, but they were wrong. Creation is infinitely more difficult, infinitely more rewarding, and infinitely more powerful. But, even as Zara demonstrated capabilities that redefined what dragons could be, the military commanders were struggling with a more immediate problem. Their weapons were completely useless against someone who could manipulate reality at a galactic scale. Every shot they fired was simply absorbed into Zara's ongoing creation project, becoming fuel for even more elaborate expressions of possibility. "How do we fight something like this?" the Zenthari fleet commander asked over a private channel shared by all the military leaders. "You don't fight it," came a new voice over the communication array. "You join it." The speaker was Captain Sarah Chen, Marcus's niece and the commander of one of Earth's newest exploration vessels. Her ship dropped out of quantum tunnel space in the middle of the assembled fleets, broadcasting human diplomatic codes and a message that made every commander in the task force reconsider their priorities. "This is Captain Chen of the Earth vessel Possibility. I carry a message from the United Nations Security Council and the Human Colonial Administration to all vessels present. Effective immediately, the human government formally recognizes the Void Nexus as a sovereign territory and claims protective jurisdiction over all beings who have sought refuge there." The silence that followed was profound. Furthermore, Captain Chen continued, "Earth formally requests that all beings with abilities similar to those demonstrated here report to Nexus stations for training and integration into what we are calling the Reality Shepherds program. We believe that the galaxy has spent too much time learning how to destroy things and not enough time learning how to build them." Elder Vortha's roar of outrage was audible across all communication channels. "Humans cannot grant sovereignty to aberrations. You have no authority to actually." "We do," Captain Chen interrupted. "According to the Galactic Accord signed after first contact, any species that demonstrates fundamentally new capabilities has the right to establish protective territories for the development of those capabilities. What Zara and her friends have demonstrated here clearly qualifies." Marcus smiled with pride as his niece continued her diplomatic offensive. Furthermore, Earth's xenobiology research teams have concluded that approximately 12% of beings throughout the galaxy possess latent abilities similar to those demonstrated by the Nexus community. These individuals have been systematically marginalized, exiled, or eliminated by existing power structures because their capabilities didn't fit conventional understanding of what was possible. "What are you saying?" the Supreme Admiral demanded. "I'm saying that there are millions of beings throughout the galaxy who have been told they are broken, worthless, or dangerous simply because they're different. And we're offering them a place where they can discover what they're really capable of instead of spending their lives apologizing for not being what someone else expected them to be." As if to demonstrate her point, signals began coming in from ships throughout the assembled fleets. Crew members who had spent their lives hiding unusual abilities were suddenly broadcasting their stories. A Zenthari engineer who could convince machines to work better than their specifications should allow. A Kelleran navigator who could sense quantum currents that didn't appear on any instruments. A Vakari communications officer who could understand languages that hadn't been programmed into translation systems. Dozens of beings who had thought they were alone in their differences were discovering that they were part of something much larger. "This is rebellion," Vorth declared. "Mutiny against the established order." "This is evolution," Dr. Vasquez replied. "And the beautiful thing about evolution is that it doesn't ask permission from the structures it's replacing." But the conversation was interrupted by an announcement from Crystalmind that changed everything. "Zara, I'm detecting quantum signatures indicating that your galaxy project has triggered something unexpected. The changes you've made are propagating beyond the target area." "What do you mean?" Zara asked, though most of her attention was still focused on the delicate work of shepherding an entire galaxy into new configurations of possibility. "I mean that reality itself is responding to what you've created. The enhanced quantum fields, the optimized matter distributions, the consciousness-friendly energy patterns, they're spreading to neighboring regions of space. It's as if the universe likes what you've built and wants to incorporate it into normal operations." Marcus stared at the readings with growing amazement. "Zara, I think you've just demonstrated that reality isn't as fixed as everyone thought it was. You've shown it a better way to work, and it's adopting those improvements automatically." The implications hit everyone simultaneously. If reality could learn from the changes Zara had made, if the universe itself preferred configurations that supported cooperation and diversity over conflict and homogeneity, then everything about how galactic civilization organized itself would need to be reconsidered. This is what we're really offering, Marcus announced to the assembled fleets. Not just a place for outcasts and misfits to hide, but a demonstration that the universe works better when everyone is allowed to contribute their unique gifts. Zara couldn't have reshaped that galaxy by herself. She needed teachers, assistants, and friends who understood different aspects of how reality operates. What we've built here isn't just a refuge. It's a proof of concept. Elder Vorth made one final attempt to maintain the old order. Even if what you say is true, even if these aberrations possess valuable capabilities, they cannot be allowed to operate without oversight. They must be regulated, controlled, integrated into existing command structures. No, Zara said quietly, but her voice carried across the entire region of space with the authority of someone who had just reshaped reality at a galactic scale. We cannot be controlled because control is what broke us in the first place. We can be partnered with, learned from, and worked alongside. But we will never again allow ourselves to be told that our differences make us worthless. The standoff that followed lasted exactly 17 minutes. 17 minutes during which military commanders throughout the assembled fleets watched their crews volunteer to transfer to the Reality Shepherds program. 17 minutes during which long-range sensors confirmed that the changes Zara had made to the distant galaxy were indeed spreading to other regions of space, making the universe measurably more stable and life-friendly. 17 minutes during which it became clear that the old way of doing things wasn't just morally wrong, it was inefficient. The surrender came from an unexpected source. The Voidwalkers, beings who existed partially outside normal reality and had seen the long-term consequences of civilizational choices across multiple timelines, spoke for the first time in the entire encounter. The pattern is set, their spokesperson announced in a voice that seemed to come from several dimensions simultaneously. What has been demonstrated here will spread throughout reality whether the current power structures accept it or not. The choice is not whether this change will happen, but whether it happens with cooperation or despite resistance. What are you saying? The Supreme Admiral asked. We are saying that this small dragon and her human friend have just obsoleted every assumption that galactic civilization is based on. Fighting them is like fighting the tide. You can do it, but you will lose, and the universe will be reorganized around better principles whether you participate or not. The first ship to stand down was a Kelleran science vessel whose crew had been fascinated by the reality manipulation demonstrations. Then, a Zenthuri exploration craft whose captain decided that learning about new possibilities was more interesting than destroying them. Within an hour, 2/3 of the assembled fleets had requested permission to send delegations to the Nexus to learn more about the Reality Shepherds program. Elder Vorth and the Dragon Council held out the longest, but even they eventually accepted what had become inevitable. The universe had seen a better way to work, and it was implementing those improvements whether the old authorities approved or not. 6 months later, Zara stood on the observation deck of the Nexus and watched the first graduates of the Reality Shepherds program board ships bound for every corner of the galaxy. Some were beings who had always known they were different and had finally found a place where different was valued. Others were individuals who had discovered latent abilities they never knew they possessed. All of them were heading out to help transform galactic civilization from a collection of competing powers into a cooperative network dedicated to helping the universe achieve its full potential. Any regrets? Marcus asked, joining her at the observation window. About what? Zara replied. About not being the kind of dragon your people expected you to be. Zara smiled, her scales shimmering with colors that had never existed until she learned how to create new possibilities. I am exactly the kind of dragon I was always meant to be. It just took finding the right teacher to help me understand what that meant. Marcus looked out at the ships departing for distant stars, each one carrying the seeds of changes that would eventually touch every civilization in the galaxy. You know, when I found you crashed in my junkyard, I thought I was just helping an injured kid. What do you think now? Now I think I was helping the universe figure out how to become a better place to live. Zara laughed, the sound carrying harmonics that made the quantum fields around them sing with joy. Marcus, you always were too modest. You didn't help the universe figure out anything. You just showed one broken dragon that broken things aren't really broken, they just need someone who understands what they're actually supposed to do. And, what are you supposed to do? Make homes, Zara said simply. For anyone who has ever been told they don't belong anywhere. Make homes where impossible things are normal, where being different is a gift instead of a curse, and where the biggest crime isn't breaking the rules.